31st of August, 11th Sunday after Trinity. Sermon on Luke chapter 14, verses 1 and 7 to 14, and Hebrews chapter 13, verses 1 to 8, 15 and 16. Today it's not usual to bother about rank or precedent when we attend a dinner or invite guests. And so Jesus' teaching about how guests might vie for places on the top tables or where they're seated needs some interpretation. The occasion arose because Jesus was invited one Sabbath to eat at the home of an important Pharisee. He knew he was being watched, and indeed there before him was the first test, a man with dropsy. Jesus healed the man, of course, and he challenged those who no doubt gave disapproving glances. Would not they help a son, or even an ox that fell into a well on the Sabbath day? Of course they would. How much more then should he heal a man who had been suffering for so long? However, Jesus then noticed how people sought the best places at the table, and he gave this teaching: to take the lowest place rather than risk being asked to make way for someone of higher rank. One might, however, then be honoured by being placed higher. His overall message was, everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. I find it difficult to imagine myself in any similar situation, but I suppose not to think of oneself as being of any great importance, more than anyone else, is a good rule by which to live and conduct oneself. However, the next directive given by Jesus is very relevant: to invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. In other words, don't consort just with your own kind. Widen out, be inclusive and welcoming. Make them welcome in your churches, at your social occasions, in your home. Treat them like the fellow human beings beloved by God that they undoubtedly are. I have a dear friend whom I first happened to meet one day when I was shopping. After chatting with her several times, I realised she was poor, and I started to take her out to lunch each week, got to know her and learn about her family, her faith and her circumstances. Over the years she's been to my house to spend the day. I've met her children, taken them to the seaside, to National Trust properties, and last school holidays we all went to Auckland Castle together. I don't feel I'm patronising her. We're mutually dependent. I help her materially. She prays for me every day, and I feel enriched by her friendship and love. I don't think about being repaid at the resurrection of the righteous, as Jesus promised, because I'm being repaid already. As Christians, we have no need to think of status. We're all in need of Christ's forgiveness. In his eyes, we're all equal. Top tables, seating plans, and all the rest should be irrelevant to us. The writer of the letter to the Hebrews gives a similar injunction: to keep on loving each other, whoever we are, as brothers, members of one family, and to be willing to entertain strangers. They could be angels in disguise. I doubt if I've ever given hospitality to an angel, but among others we've briefly housed a Syrian refugee. We prayed for our plumber when his infant son was rushed into hospital, helped a painter and decorator to choose hymns for his wedding, gave the men who fitted our bathroom the money to go for a pub lunch while they waited for a delayed delivery. And we always go to speak to any travellers who camp on the green outside our house, make them welcome, and offer them the use of our outside tap. We Christians are also told to remember those in prison and those who have been ill-treated, feeling true empathy for them, suffering with them. We can be good listeners, ready to offer encouragement and help. Listening is an important part of empathy. I once arrived at a church to take a service, and the steward came up to me to ask how I was. I was about to have an operation on my back, and I was in some pain. I thought it might show on my face, so I briefly told him. "But otherwise you're fine," he said, and walked off. That isn't listening. Another recommendation is not to be ruled by the love of money and to be content with what we have. In that way, we will be much more ready to share what we have, not counting the cost of what we give away, being happy to help others. The Lord will provide for us. God has promised never to leave or forsake us, and we have no need to fear. These words of Scripture can give us a great deal of comfort and confidence as we go about our Christian lives. We can gain much joy from serving others, from coming alongside them, learning from them. I'm often amazed at the faith of homeless people with whom I stop to chat. I simply can't imagine my faith standing the test if I found myself living on the streets without comfort or shelter. Yet these dear people are often so cheerful, grateful and faithful. I remember Abby, whom we met in York 2 years ago. We stopped to talk to her, gave her some money and asked her about her life. She'd fled an abusive partner, but her face was so full of joy it put me to shame. I still pray for her. We have no idea whom God will put in our way as we go about our daily lives, but let us be prepared to love and accept anyone and everyone. There's a great deal of prejudice at large in this world, with some even trying to turn back the clock, rejecting recent moves towards diversity, equality and inclusion. But acceptance and inclusion have always been God's way, from the moment that he called Abraham to be his friend. Imagine being friends with the Almighty. And when he promised him that through his offspring all the nations, all of them, would be blessed. The teaching of Jesus and of the writer of Hebrews gives us much food for thought and directives to follow. It will help to further the kingdom, establishing it here on earth, as we look forward to its final fulfillment when Christ returns to welcome us all.